Hello guys. So continuing from our last video where we saw how to push our app to Azure. What we want to do now is we want to actually use a database in our application. And the way to do that is the different ways to set up your database depends on the way you set up your database infrastructure, depends on how complex your application is. And I see a lot of people using repositories and iRepositories and all of that, but this is a fairly simple application and we don't need all of that complexity, right? So what we're going to do though is I'll introduce you to a pattern that we use for .NET applications, which you might encounter in your first job, is that .NET developers like to separate their data layer into a whole different project. So just follow along and watch me and I'll explain as I walk. So if you remember, we're on the master branch because we deployed to Azure from the master branch. So I'm just going to switch to the dev branch. So check out dev. I'll merge the work I did in master to dev. Merge dev. So git merge master. I'll push it to GitHub. Git push origin dev. And yeah, we're ready to continue. So now, one thing we can do, we can simply come into our estate app folder and create a data folder, which is going to hold everything related to our databases. But we're not going to do that. We're going to add an entirely new project, but it's a different kind of project. It's not a web API project, and it's not a web app project. It's something called a class library. So I'm going to go on. I'm going to go down into my source folder, and I have the estate app folder there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project here. I'm going to say .NET new class lib, which is for class library. Class library is a type of project that you just use to put related code together. You can't run it. It's not an application. It's not a web app or mobile app that you can run, but it can be used to hold related code, and then other types of application can then use that code. So that is what a class library is. It's just a collection of classes that you put together that other applications can use, or other types of applications can use. So I'll say .NET new class library, and I'll name it estate app.data, and then I'll say net core app 3.1, and this just specifies that I wanted .NET Core 3.1 class library, right? So estate app.data. I'm going to hit enter here and show you what it does. Now in our source folder, you see we have two projects. We have our estate app project, and we have our estate app.data. The difference between them is that our estate app project has a program.cs, which an entry point. Remember, I told you guys that the main method is the entry point for all .NET applications, but the data project does not have any of that. In fact, it just has one class which says class1.cs and a CS project. It doesn't have a startup file. So I'm going to remove this, and what we use the data project for really is just to hold related files. So all our classes or repositories that's related to data, I'll put it here, and then I'm going to be using them from the estate app project, and that's the workflow we're working with, and this is the way you should organize your .NET project. So I'm going to say, and so I want to commit the work I just did. So we'll get status, let's see what's changed. I'll say git add docs, git commit added data project, and git push origin. Remember, we're on dev. Okay, so yeah, so push that. Now I named this estate app.data, and the convention really is to name this estate app.web. So this is part of the estate app project, where it's the web, like it's the interface, and this is the layer, if you will, that holds everything related to data. So just plain impulse, I feel like changing this to estateapp.web. So I'm going to rename this to estateapp.web, and this will then mean that I have a lot of renaming to do here. So I'm going to come in here. I have to rename the CS purge to estateapp.web.cspurge, and you should do this too. Estateapp.web.cspurge. I need to go through to make sure if there's a namespace I need to change. So the namespace now changes from estateapp to estateapp.web. I'm just going to copy this so I can just paste this in every other place I need to change. So estateapp.web here, I'll come to program.cs. I need to change it to estateapp.web. Just do this modification. We don't have any change to do here. Nothing to change here. Nothing to change here. www, there's nothing to change here. Let's see, for view stats, there's nothing to change. So estateapp.web, there's a change here. This changes too. If we had named this project estateapp.web from the onset, we wouldn't have to do this. We're just doing this now just to maintain conventions. I don't think there's anything to change here or here. Check the home folder index. There's nothing to change here. No namespace to change here. Properties, let's see our launch settings. There's nothing to change here. Models, there's definitely something to change here. So this changes from estateapp.models to estateapp.web.models. I can check our controllers. Our controllers namespace has to change. I think that's about it. Let's see. So let's say if I will see the estateapp.web, and let's see if we can still build this. I'll start from running .NET Clean. So .NET Clean removes. So .NET Clean basically removes the old build files that were generated, and I can say .NET build. Oh, it's a mistake. So .NET build. I see I have an error somewhere. Let's see. Oh, there's no error. It's just the type of namespace models does not exist in the. So we have an error in the home controller line 8. Let's go check that out. I think it's something we forgot to change. There's line 8. Okay, estateapp.models. We need to change this to .web.models. So the namespace matches. Let's see. And cool, change that. So now we have some consistency. We know that this project here is the one for data, this is the one for web, and this is the one that displays. And we can have several projects in one solution, so to say, or in one solution we can have several projects, and we just kind of just separate different things. And right now we're only separating the web part from the data part. And some people ask, why is it necessary to separate it? For right now, I want to use SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server for our database. So I'm doing this. What if tomorrow I decide, oh, I want to use MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database, a different type of database. I want to use my SQL. Instead of having to come in here and change a lot of things, I just create a new project and say estateapp.mongo.data. And I do the implementation for the access to the database and all of that in it. And then I just tell my web part, okay, don't use the database from estateapp.data anymore. Use the one from estateapp.mongo.data, and it just helps. I don't have to go into the web project changing a lot of things. I just redirect it. Awesome. I just want to run this and make sure I can still view my application in the browser. So .NET run. Okay, so we see that it's running. Let's take it to the browser. Take it to the browser. Amazing. Our application still runs. So what do we need to do next? We want to actually configure a database. So I'm going to come into the data folder. Let's commit all of this, and before we forget, so git add. Let's go back a level. Cd dot git add dot and git commit m added data project. Okay, let's see. Then git push origin dev, and we just push this to awesome. Now we actually start implementing our data folder. The first thing we do is we're going to add a folder called let's name it DB contexts. Let's name this folder data. So there are a lot of options for what you can name this, but let's name this database contexts. So we're going to have multiple database contexts in this application. I'm sure you're used to having one, or explain why. So let's call this database context, and then we're going to add a new folder. And within database context, I'm going to add another folder, and I'm going to call it authentication db context. Now this is .cs. I'll call this authentication db context. I'll just expand this to see where it went. All right, it's there. And within database context, I'll add yet another folder. I'll add yet another folder, and I'll call it application db context. And why do I have two folders? I have two folders because I want to separate my database context. I want a different database context to manage my users, so it's only going to manage my users, and then I want a separate database context to manage all other things in my application. So for example, my properties, my and all of those things, images and all. So all of that is going to be managed by the second database context. Great, so I'm going to go in here now, and let's do the application DB context first. I'm going to come in here and say, or before we do this, let me show you how to link the two projects. So we need a way to link these two projects. The way to do that is to come to our command line. I'm going to say ls cdsrc. Then it's usually a one-way link. It's called referencing, so you can reference one project from another. It's like saying, hey, I want to use the classes in this other project, in this first project. So I have two projects, say A and B. When I reference B project, I'm saying I want to be able to use the classes from B project in A project. And that is what I want to do now. I want to be able to use the classes from my data project in my web project. So then I can use the database context class I created in the data project and the web project. And the way to do that is simply say, I'll go into the project I want to add the reference from. I'll say cd estates app dot web, and then I'll say .net add reference, and then I tell it, oh, where's the folder I want to reference. I know the way to get to that folder is to say // which takes me back one folder, and then I know that project is an estates app .data, and this is how to reference a project right from the command line. Estates app .data / estates app data.csplog.csproj, and this is it here. So we're referencing this file from the web project. So .net add reference estateapp.data / estateapp.data.csproj. Hit enter, and it tells you reference added to the project. Now let me show you some magic. When we come to estateapp.web and we come to the csproj, we see a project reference here. This means all the classes that we're going to put in our data folder is now going to be available to our web project to use. I'm just going to, because this is my job milestone, I'll say clear and I'll say .NET. Let's go back a bit. Let's say .NET add dot and git add dot, and I'll say git commit m added reference to data project. I'm going to push this to dev, git push origin dev, and so we've added the reference. We can now continue adding our database context files, right? Going to come into our data project. Let's create the database context for identity first. So the authentication DB context, the one that is going to use to manage users. Going to right click here and say add new file, and I'm going to add a class, a new C# class called authentication DB context.cs. Awesome. Now I need to put the namespace and all of that. So the namespace is going to be obviously estateapp.data dot so we're in the database context folder. And we're in the authentication DB context folder. Authentication DB context. Awesome. So we have our namespace. Save this, and then the class, right? Public class authentication DB context. Great. Now, if you've watched any of my videos on identity, you probably haven't, but we need to add some Nugget packages to this solution. Now, Nugget packages are a way to pull in functionality into our app. And for us to be able to use a database context, we need to use a package called ASP.NET Core Identity, which gives us a lot of helpful features to manage users, create users, and all of that. That is one. Two, we get Entity Framework Core, which helps us to work with a database. Now, I'm going to, I have a project I already set up. So because I can't remember most of those packages by hand, I'm simply going to open up a different project and get some of those package names from there. I think this is it. I'll close this up and let's look at nope, this isn't it. This is, let's see. Okay, I think this is it. Demo web app. Just open with code here. Close this. Alright, I'm just going to look at the csproj for it so I see the packages. Now, these are some of the packages I need to install. I'm simply going to copy them. You can pause the video and see, but I'm going to come here and I want to add these packages to the I want to add these packages to the data project, right? I'll say cd estateapp.data, cd estateapp.data, and the way to add a Nugget package is to say .NET add package, and you supply the name of the package. So in this case, this package we want to add right now is Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.IdentityFramework.Core. So this is a project we're adding right now, .NET add package. We add it to the data project. It's added that. The next one to add is Microsoft.entity framework called .design. So I'm just going to copy it. So once again, .NET add package Microsoft.entity framework called .design. I'll hit enter and let it add that. And then I'll take the last one, the SQL Server, which lets us talk to our SQL Server database. So .NET add package once again, and I'll paste that in Microsoft.entity framework called SQL Server. I'll say enter. Great, I have added those Nugget packages. And if I come to my estate.cs project, I see I have those packages here. I'm going to commit this. So git add dot git commit and Nugget packages. And then I'll just push this to dev. Okay, awesome. We can now return to our authentication DB context. To make this a DB context, we have to inherit from something called an identity DB context. A second. Okay, so I don't know why it's not I'm going to close this project and just reopen it. For some reason I'm not getting IntelliSense and code completion and all of that, so I'll just go back a bit and then reopen it. Code dot and just continue from where we stopped, right? I'll close this from the source folder, estate app.data. Now I don't want to open you. Database context. Okay, I'll just say yes. Required assets to, I'll say yes. Okay. Okay, yeah, so I was expecting this error, I didn't see it, so that's why I had to restart the project. So now it's saying, hey, I don't know what identity DB context is. All I have to do is hold control and period, or control and full stop, and then use this using statement. Awesome. Now there are other, we need to create a class that is going to represent our user. We're going to go into estate app.data and create a new folder at the root and call it entities. This entities folder is going to hold every class that is going to be saved to our database. So for example, we're going to be saving users to our database. So we're going to create a class that would represent the users. To do this, I'm going to create a new shop file here. I'll call it application user.cs. Once again, namespace. So namespace is estate app.data. Entities. So this is a short one. Awesome. Then public class application user. Now to make this class, we have to inherit from identity user to make this a class that can manage users. Basically, to make this a class that can manage users with ASP.NET Core, we have to make it, we have to inherit from identity user. The same way we inherit from controller to make a class a controller, we have to inherit from identity user. Hold period and full stop to resolve this using statement. Okay, so now I have application user here. I'm going to return to my authentication DB context and say identity DB context of application user. Now I just have to bring in the using statement this class is almost ready to go. We just need to I'm just going to quickly grab a piece of code from the data folder here. I'll just take this, and this is standard setup code, right? So I'm just passing in some options. So these options, we're going to configure these options later, like where our database connection string is and all of that. Application or authentication. So I'm going to change a couple of things here. This has to become authentication DB context, and this becomes authentication 2, and we're going to bring in the using statement, and then our authentication DB context class is ready, and in a bit we'll be able to register users. Awesome. I'm going to clear this. I'll commit once again. It's add dot git commit added authentication DB. I forgot my quotes. Authentication DB contexts class. I push it to dev. Okay, great. Okay, so what are we trying to achieve here? We want to be able to, so we've created our authentication DB context. We need to tell it which database to connect to, and we already did a course on I already made a video on databases, and the way to use this database, we have to come into our app settings.json. This is app settings.json, and we need to basically put a database connection string in here. And I'm just going to grab a database connection string from the other project. I'll copy this from here, and you can have a good look at this, because your database connection string would look pretty much the same. I'm going to put this code on GitHub, so you can just go to the GitHub and copy the connection string. If you installed local DB, you're going to be using this connection string. If you installed the full SQL server, the connection string is going to be different. The only thing you have to change here is the database name. So I'm going to change my database name to estates app DB. I'll save that, and that's good to go. The next thing we need to do is to configure, go to startup.cs and let our application know that, okay, we're using a database in this application. So the way to let our database know that we're using a database in this application is to configure the database. And to configure the database, we come into this configure services, and we say services.add DB context pool. DB. For some reason it's not here. I'll just pick it from this project. Okay, that's weird. Oh, okay. So we need to add because we added entity framework core to our data project. I remember what went wrong. We added all those Nugget packages to this data project, but not to the web project. So we need to add them to the web project too before we can use it. So I'll show you a very fast way to add it. If you've already added those packages to If you've already added all of those packages to one app, you can just copy this package references, right, over to another app. So that's what I'm going to do. Instead of having to do all of this and all over again, I'll just copy this package references and bring them from, look, I'm copying them from estates.app.data.csproj. I'll just copy this, all of them, because I want the same Nugget packages. I'll close this, and then I'll come to the web app, open the csproj for this. You know, because there's no Nugget package, I can copy the whole item group. So I'll come here. If you're feeling like doing the whole .NET add package individually, that's great. Or I can just copy this from one csproj, close this, bring it to the web csproj, and just paste it in here. And it tells me, oh, there are some packages that I haven't restored. Do I want to restore them? And I say restore. If that doesn't pop up, you can simply come to your command line. You go to the folder, cd estate app, cd src/estate app.web, and then you run .NET restore. Alright, great. So I've restored those packages. If I come back here now, let's close this. If I come to startup.cs and I say services.add db, now I have db context pool. So services.add db context pool of authentication db. Now remember that I created authentication DB context in the data project, not in the web project. Now I'm trying to use it in the web project. I'm going to control period and see it's importing it all the way from estate app.data.database context.authentication DB context. And this is possible because I referenced it. So that whole referencing thing I did, it's now allowing me to use a class from the data project in my web project. And that's how you reference packages in .NET applications. And here I need to tell it where my database is. So I'm going to say options. This is called the fat arrow. Options.use SQL server. We're using SQL server. I'll bring the using statement. Bring this down. Options.use SQL server. And then I need to tell it where the connection string is. Now remember, the connection string is the one we pasted in here, app_settings.json, this connection string. Now the way we get the connection string is to say configuration.get connection string, and then we pass in the name of the connection string. We named this connection string default connection, right? So I'm just going to pass in the connection string. You know what? Let's rename it from different default connection because we're going to have two connection strings. So I'll name this authentication connection. So authentication connection, and I'll just put the string in here. It has to be quoted. Then I'll put the semicolon there to close it all off. And that's it. Now my application is aware that, okay, I'm going to be using a database in this application. I'll save this too. I'll say just cd get add get commit added database context to startup.cs. I'll push this to dev, git push origin dev. Great. So that's it. We've configured our application to know, okay, we're using a DB context, but then we need to tell our application that we're going to be using ASP.NET identity. So we need to tell our application, hey, we're going to be managing users, and how do we do that? How do we tell our application that we're going to be managing users? For now, just to confirm that everything still works correctly, I'm going to go to the web project, cd estate app.web, and I'm going to say .NET run. And then I'll just take this URL. Let's see. Okay, so everything still works. We're sure that nothing we've done so far has broken anything. And we're just going to deploy what we have. Although we don't have any testable functionality yet, we're going to, or rather we're going to merge this to master, and then in the next video we're just going to continue. I don't want this to get too long, so I'll say cd dot because I want to go to the root. I'll say git. You know what, let's leave it on dev because we really haven't implemented any functionality that is visible. Again, a recap, what we did in this video was we added a new project called the data project. We added a DB context called the authentication DB context, which is going to manage users. After configuring users, we're going to configure another DB context, which is going to manage things like properties, flats, apartments, all of that. And then we added an entities folder, an application user folder class. We looked at how to import Nugget packages. Like I said, Nugget packages help us get functionality into our application. For example, it was a Nugget package that allowed us to make this registration in the startup.cs that say, hey, we're using a DB context and we're using a SQL Server database. It was because we imported a Nugget package that were able to do this. So we're going to drop it here and just pick up in the next video.